Welcome back to my complete beginner's tomb engine tutorial. Today in this video, the second one, I'm going to be going through basic geometry and texturing as we build our first room in Tomb Engine to get you on your way to recreating the infamous Lost Valley from Tomb Raider 1. The first thing we're going to do is go back into the level creator. To do that, we're going to open Tomb IDE and we're going to select the level that we had created in our last video and double click. This will bring you back to the level manager, which you may remember, and all we have to do is open the level in the level list by double clicking on it, and that will open Tomb Editor. Now, if you're following the tutorial at the same pace that I'm teaching it, you're going to see a basic room with Lara in the middle of it. So the first thing we're going to do is turn the paint mode back on, called face edit mode, which allows us to see textures. The first thing we're actually going to do is erase all of our work. So what we're going to have to do is remove every texture that we've applied so far. To do that, it's quite easy. Press Textures and press Clear All Textures in Room. All of a sudden, the textures have been erased. Now, we don't want to do any texturing for the moment, and instead we're going to go back to 3D Geometry mode. I now want you to press Items and press Delete, and press Delete Objects in selected rooms. Doing that will delete all objects in the room, meaning that Lara is no longer there, so we have a basic square with no more textures and no more Lara Croft. Essentially, we're starting from scratch and we're going to make a proper room together. A Tomb Raider level is comprised by a series of rooms, quite like if you ever built a house in The Sims, except rather than building a house in The Sims, you're building a temple, a jungle, or any other environment that you want Lara Croft running around in. The world of classic Tomb Raider is actually perfectly shaped squares. If we zoom in by pressing the page up and page down button on our keyboard to zoom in and out respectively, the world is made by squares. Lara is controlled perfectly around the concept of squares. And all these squares on the map can be manipulated to create any sort of shape, ranging from a temple to a city to an industrial building to the Lost Valley, which is what we're going to be building today. Looking at the user interface for a moment, we're currently in geometry mode, and this is the mode that will allow us to manipulate these squares on the map to build our shapes that we want Lara to be running around in. As you can see, when we go back to face edit mode, the toolbar of options you can select on change depending on what mode you're in to suit what you need for any given situation. The default tool that should be selected is drag in the 3D geometry mode, and that basically allows you to drag and pull and push a square in any direction you want. If we select this square hit there, with one click, it will be turned red, and you'll see it correspond to the 2D map at the top left. If we hold down the left click and drag our mouse up, you can see that we can manipulate this specific square into any shape that we want. And we can do that for any square anywhere on the map. Walls cannot be pulled out, however. This only works on the floor and the ceiling. Remember to move the 3D map window around using the arrow keys on your keyboard to select the ceiling like this. That's the ceiling up there. Use the arrow keys. You can select the floor again. You can pull it up, pull it down. You can pull it any way you want. When we pull it down, you may notice that this green colour here is a darker green than this green, and I'll explain that to you at a later point in the video as it relates to texturing. The Lost Valley is one of the most infamous levels in Tomb Raider, and one of the first areas that you explore in the Lost Valley is the infamous waterfall area with the wolves. And if you've played the level, you know there's actually a secret temple hidden behind this waterfall. So this is actually the first room we want to build. And I selected the Lost Valley because if you're a fan of Tomb Raider, that level is probably in your memory, so you remember it quite well what it looks like. If you don't, you can go onto YouTube and watch a Let's Play video. I've actually a Let's Play video of Tomb Raider on my YouTube channel. You can watch that if you wish to. You don't have to, there's commentary. However, we're going to be building that first room from the Lost Valley. In fact, let me superimpose a picture of it on the top left of the screen here. Now, I really don't want to obstruct the view of useful tools we're going to be using, so if at any point I need to access the tools, the picture will go away. But this just serves as a reference image to what we're going to be building and what you're going to be building. Now, when I look at this area of the Lost Valley, the first thing that kind of becomes apparent to me are those whitey stone walls that Lara Croft can swan dive off of. We've all jumped off of them. How about we get started by recreating some of that? Let's make sure that our map is facing north. How do you know it's facing north? Well, this 2D mini map up here serves as a guide. If I select this square at the top of the map, which is facing north, you can see that it's facing north. Now in game, I think this actually faces east. However, for all intents and purposes of, a beginner's tutorial, this is north. If it's north in the level editor, it's north in game for me. So because we've selected the top at this 2D map and that's there, we know that's the north of the map. So now that we're all in agreement that we're facing north, the first thing we can actually go ahead and do is manipulate this tile right here by clicking and dragging it. When I click and drag it, you might notice that on the bottom of your level editor, the Y value is changing as I drag it up and down. This is a really useful guide because Lara's world revolves around the concept of clicks and tiles. For example, when Y is equal to 3, as in this block here is 3 clicks tall, that's actually the same height as Lara Croft. Another useful tidbit is that Lara Croft can jump 7 clicks high. Throughout the many Tomb Raider adventures, Lara Croft jumps and grabs onto many things, and she can jump 7 clicks high. So with this block raised here 7 clicks tall, we could put Lara there and she'd be able to climb onto that and reach it. However, if I made it 8 clicks tall, as Y is equal to 8, Lara would no longer be able to jump up and grab that. So remember that Lara can only grab 7 clicks tall, and she's normally about 3 clicks tall herself. Back to the Lost Valley, if we look at those rocks, we can see they're quite slippery, and we know that if Lara Croft lands on them, she's going to slide right off into the water. So how do we do that in our level? Well, let's drag this one up about 3 clicks tall. Now what I want you to do is to press on the square again, and that should bring up arrows. Arrows will allow you to manipulate the block in any given direction. If you click it 5 times, it will remove the arrow, which will allow you to normally adjust it like we previously have. However, if you have the arrow facing in a certain direction and then click up, you're going to notice the block begins to go in a curve. It goes in a slope shape. Remember to use the page in and page out keys to zoom in and out of your editor, and to use the arrow keys to rotate around the editor window, just so we can get a better view. If we click and drag this up, you can see it's going in a slope direction. If a slope is any more than 2 clicks, Lara will slide off of it. However, if it's only 1 or 2 clicks high, she can traverse it. With the arrow facing north, let's raise it by 2 clicks, making a slope going north. Using the keys on our keyboard to rotate the map, let's get the arrow facing west. Now let's raise it 2 more clicks. As you can see, it's now going in a northwestern direction. Because this is 4 clicks in total, Lara will slide off of this. Remember, the rule is Lara can traverse anything that's 2 clicks or less. However, if the slope is more than 2 clicks in any direction, she's going to slide off. Let's go ahead and select the square next to it. And we're going to do the same to try work towards making an organic shape of rocks. I'm going to select the square again beside it. And I'm simply going to manipulate it to make it look kind of, organic shaped. We're going to remember this is going to be textured and it's going to look like rocks on a wall. And we want to have a natural organic shape and not to look too blocky. However, in this situation, the 4 times the charm, because we actually want this square here to be the iconic square that Lara can swan dive off of. So what we're going to do is just raise it up and keep it dead flat. In fact, if you ever played the Lost Valley, you know that while we initially come down here to battle the wolves, we eventually have to come back here after we collect some cogs in a jungle so that we can complete a puzzle to advance to the next part of the level. So next thing we're going to do is build the area that will allow Lara to climb back up the mountains and the rocks so she can complete her adventure. To do that, we're going to select the square again beside it and essentially make steps. Now, how big you want these steps to be will determine how Lara traverses them. If a step is only 1 click in difference, Lara can run up it with no issues. If it's 2 clicks or more, Lara's going to have to stop to vault up in many different ways. You might remember that from the various ways that Lara traverses the adventure of Tomb Raider. I'm going to give this 1 click, which allows Lara to simply run up and do a swan dive if she wants to. Now, while we can always select 1 square at a tile, if you click and hold your mouse, you can also select multiple tiles, and you let go once you have your selections. Select 2 tiles, and if we drag, that will manipulate both tiles we've selected. This allows you to shape rooms faster, so it doesn't take you, days to make 1 room. It allows you to build levels much quicker once you have an idea in your imagination of how you want the room to look like. I'm going to continue focusing on making steps that will take Lara from the top here down to the ground. It's going to be 2 clicks of a slope. Lara will actually be able to run up and down that. She won't just slide off of it. I'm going to do the same for the tile beside it. For this tile, what I'm actually not going to do is the same because I kind of want it to look organic and rocks aren't perfect. I don't want everything to be exactly the same shape. We want variety, we want it to look interesting. So for that one, I'm going to leave it like that. I'm going to select these two tiles right here. The great thing about the level editor, it's quite like clay. You're able to basically mold it into the shape you want, one click at a time. So we keep clicking and we make the shape that we want. We may even decide to make the platforming more challenging for Lara, and rather than it being a smooth way for her to get down, that we might make this even taller so that when she actually wants to climb back up to the top of the waterfall, she first has to, kind of vault up here and then work her way up this before she makes her way back up here. The added challenge will make the geometry of the room look more interesting to get the aesthetic that we're looking for, which of course is the classic Lost Valley. Remember to use the arrow keys on your map to move the map around in any direction you want to give you a better view, particularly if you're working on a laptop or a smaller screen. Now, while this may look good so far, one thing that if we're actually looking at this and we're thinking about it, the Lost Valley was much more epic in size compared to what we have here. And what I mean by that, it's much taller, the ceiling was much higher than what we're seeing right here. So how about we go ahead and make the room taller? That's very easy to do. There's actually several ways to go about it, but I'm going to show you the easiest based on what I've taught you so far. Remember how you can select multiple tiles by clicking and dragging like this? You can also do the same in the 2D map by doing this. It's the same idea. Click and hold and drag to select multiple tiles. Now what we're actually going to do is point the camera towards the ceiling, and if we click and drag, sure enough, we're raising the ceiling of the entire room. We know that we've selected every square in the entire room because if we look at our 2D map, it's completely surrounded by a wedge square. That means no matter what, every square in that room has been selected and there's no way you can mess that up. And basically we can drag the entire roof up and down, and that allows you to make the room taller or shorter. In small dungeons and caverns, you can have small tight rooms for Lara to crawl around, but we want an epic big room for Lara because the Lost Valley was an epic level. We're going to raise the roof until the Y value is going to be equal to 20 as indicated by the bottom of this map here. Y equals to 20. That's exactly what we're looking for. Now if we move our map back up, you can actually see the room is much taller, and yeah, if that was taller, that would be a lot more of a dangerous leap for Lara to fall off of. Now we're kind of getting more to the epic proportions of the Lost Valley and what it's known for. Using the same logic, we can actually select the tiles that we've already worked on and make them taller. So we can actually drag them up like that. Now, looking at it, you can kind of see for yourself that if Lara was to fall off of the summit here at the top, that, it would be a long hard fall. She might even kill herself. And that's what we're looking for in Tomb Raider, right? Is a sense of danger. So we want the room to be nice and tall, that if you do make a mistake and fall off, she may very well fall to her death. However, we do know for this infamous area, there's a nice little waterfall under here, which means there's a pool of water that might save her. Let's go ahead and select the squares that we've already worked on and move them up so that they're the same shape. As you can see, because of our adjustments and the room is much taller now, we now have to go back and kind of work on the squares we've already kind of played with to kind of just make sure that Lara can get to the ground in a more organic way. This can be a lot of trial and error, and it's a great way for you to experiment with geometry to make really interesting shapes that look visually interesting for the player to play in, and it's entertaining for the player to move around in because Lara will have to navigate the terrain in many different ways, and she has the moves to do it. Simply clicking and dragging will allow you to move this easily. I'm going to manipulate that just to kind of get the look that I'm going for. Feel free to manipulate these in any way you want, by the way. I'm just doing it the way to recreate the Lost Valley, which is basically what this tutorial is all about. Simply clicking and dragging will allow you to adjust the shapes of these squares. I'm going to move it east, and I'm going to work on making some slopes here that make it dangerous for Lara if she falls off the safe path up. Remember, any slope taller than 2 clicks Lara will slide off of. This slope here is obviously steeper than this slope here. Don't forget to regularly save. You can do that by pressing File and press Save Level, or use the shortcut Ctrl S. Well, I've shown you how to rotate the map and zoom in and out using page up and page down to zoom in and out, and using the arrow keys on your keyboard to rotate the map. If you actually want to physically move the position of the map so you can get a better view of a certain area, for example, just say we want to kind of get in better to get a better view of this part of the map, holding shift on your keyboard and right clicking will actually allow you to physically move the position of the map, not actually in the game itself, just to move the camera of the map. That allows you to zoom in and out of the areas better. If you're using a mouse, the mouse wheel will also allow you to zoom in and out. In addition, while you can rotate the map using the left, right, up and down arrow keys, you can also rotate the map by holding the right click and moving the cursor. If you ever have a selection of squares selected and highlighted in red, and you want to stop that, get rid of it, hit the escape key on your keyboard. So this is the area that we've just built. Why don't we do something really fun and texture it? To do that, we're going to move into face edit mode by pressing this button. And as you can see, our tools have changed that better reflect the options we need when we're texturing. Now things that have gone from, using your finger to pull and push blocks have turned into brushes, pencils, paint buckets, and even more than that, grip paints, group texturing, eraser, invisibility. I will explain all these to you at a later point. But first things first, keep it on brush. Let's look for a really good ground texture that will allow Lara a safe path up. How about this texture right here? You might have seen this texture many times if you ever played a Tomb Raider game. It's used in many of the Peru levels. We can apply it to any of these squares by simply making sure the texture is selected and pressing on the square, and that will paint each square. If you click and hold, you can also paint multiple squares. Painting does not discriminate whether you're painting a floor, a wall, or a ceiling. So if you keep the button held and you move your mouse, it will paint absolutely everything. It won't just paint the floor, it will paint every wall tile and ceiling tile as well. Now all these crazy slopes that we made here that we want to be, the rocks that Lara can slip and fall off of, let's find a really great stone texture that we can place on those tiles. So I've actually got a great variety of them here. I select a texture and I place it, and as you can see, it applies. Now, as you can see, it's really beginning to take shape and creating the environment that we want the Lost Valley to look like. When selecting textures that I've provided for you, make sure that 256 is selected at all times, as I've designed the textures to be that size for this tutorial. What I'm actually going to do is press this texture at the top left, which is another type of stony, rocky wall, and I'm actually going to fill in these gaps here with it. And that will give some variety and some differentiation, just so that the level looks more visually interesting. To make the textures look even better, why don't we add some more variation to this ground path that Lara can follow? Why don't we select this texture here that has some grass growing out of it? And if we press the 3D view to move to geometry mode, why don't we paint off all of these tiles here that are the areas of the map that allow Lara to climb and traverse? When I have a particular tile selected and I try to paint, you may notice that no matter where I'm clicking, nothing's happening. That's because nothing will paint outside of a selected area. So if that happens, just be sure to press the escape button to remove the selection of tile, and that will allow you to freely texture anywhere on the map. As you can see, by adding this differentiation, it makes it easier to see that these are steps for Lara to climb up and traverse. And that's what texturing in Tomb Raider is all about. It's all about making the level as visually interesting and pretty as possible, so that these gorgeous environments also look kind of deadly and dangerous. A really great texture is what we call a transition texture. As you can see, this concrete and this stone have nothing in common. However, this texture here is called a transition texture, and that allows you to blend the two textures seamlessly. This will be explained further on, but the basics of it is it kind of allows you to make the transition from stone to concrete more seamless. Now you might be seeing that I'm actually rotating the textures. How do you do that? Well, quite simply. When you press a texture on a tile like that, hold the shift button and press it again, and it will start to rotate like so. And I'm going to do a rotation to make a really organic pattern like this. And you can kind of mold it and craft it to be whatever you want it to be. I think this might look quite good. I even give you some textures here that kind of have some cracks in the cement that will just kind of add variation to the map. So you can kind of select any of these freely. And as you can see, it makes it look less repetitive and more interesting. Game designers will sometimes use these special textures, even in modern games today, to tell players where to go. You might have heard of something called yellow paint syndrome, which is something that many gamers have complained about even in the recent Tomb Raider games, where yellow paint is conveniently placed on walls that tell the player where Lara should go and climb. However, for an example like this, it just adds some variety to the levels. Why don't we do something really fun and plan out where we should put our water? Why don't we use the texturing panel and move down to water textures from the drop down menu and find our water textures. Remember, you can zoom in and out by using the mouse scroll wheel, and we're going to select any of these water textures and we're just going to place it on the map to kind of give us an idea of where we want that pool of water to be that's so infamous from the classic Tomb Raider level. I think this looks quite good to me. This kind of reminds me of what the Lost Valley kind of looked like, if I remember it correctly. You know, the waterfall is kind of there. We can even select that to kind of remind us of where we want the waterfall to be. And yeah, so we're kind of getting the idea of, you know, we're creating this area from the Lost Valley. While texturing has been fun, why don't we go back to geometry mode and continue to kind of build out and sculpt the area, adding more rocky crevices along the edges of the walls just to make the area look dangerous and like the Lost Valley itself. Why don't we put a platform here that means Lara can't get out of the water to grab it. If we raise this up, that means Lara will never be able to climb out of the water and get there. Although maybe I want Lara to be able to climb out of the water there. You never know. It's really up to you to decide how you want to build this out. And simply by pushing and pulling, I'm going to sculpt out the area to how I want it. I'm always selecting between geometry mode and face edit mode just so I can kind of see the area with textures and without textures. This can sometimes help you realize your vision. So I'm kind of being random. There's not really any thought process behind the way I'm pulling and pushing these. I'm basically wanting to create kind of a really dangerous, slopey, rocky surface that looks like a cave and that I don't want, you know, Lara to be able to kind of climb on. If she hits these, I want her to slide right off back to the ground where the wolves are going to be. I'm also kind of going upwards in direction until I hit the ceiling because we want this room to look really epic and really tall. So I'm just about to hit the ceiling, which kind of tells us that you can kind of start to see the boundary of this room, where it's going to begin and where it's going to end. We're probably never going to need to do anything to these tiles here because, you know, once you hit the ceiling, you're never going to kind of see that area. In fact, we may even crop it later on in the video. Remember to use your keyboard to rotate around the map so you can get into different areas and you can adjust them accordingly. Sometimes when you're making these kind of rocky formations, it's kind of a good idea to follow where the slopes are going because you don't want these slopes to go in all sorts of different directions. As you can see, that kind of has this kind of natural kind of look to it, although this looks too perfect, so we might, you know, manipulate these ones here. Again, we can go back to face edit mode and work on, you know, texturing. Let's go back to our nature textures. Let's find some more of our stone texture and apply it. Don't forget to zoom in and out to get better view. Don't forget, if you have a tile selected like that, to press the escape button so that you don't lose control of where you can texture. And I'm kind of just going to apply it to all this rocky formation that we don't really want Lara to be going on. As you can see, it's starting to look a bit weird because we've used the same texture for all of these tiles. So this is usually a good chance, again, as we did over here, to bring in a variety of textures to kind of separate it, to make it look more visually compelling and interesting. So I really like this blue texture here. That's kind of a mountain rocky texture. Although looking at that doesn't look good. So how about we go back to 3D mode and apply it to these wall textures here instead. Not great, but it is looking better. Remember, holding shift allows you to rotate a texture after you place it. Okay, also not great, but it is admittedly looking slightly better. And later on in the tutorial video series, I will be going into advanced texturing on how to make compelling looking environments using better texturing techniques than what we've done here. But since again, you're a complete beginner, if you're watching this video, you'll understand the fundamentals of texturing in Tomb Editor. And you know, if we go back to our textures and, you know, we kind of play around and we add a bit of interest like that, maybe we rotate it a little bit. See the way that's kind of like a nice transition texture? Maybe we can put kind of a crack there. Why don't we finish painting off the floor? I've added rocks over here. I'm actually going to add some rocks over here to match it. Again, I'm going to go back to face edit mode. I'm going to select my stone textures, so we're going to apply them like that. And as you can see, the area is really starting to come to life. It's really beginning to look like that infamous area from the Lost Valley level. We can even grab another texture. Let's take this one, for example, and start painting the walls a little bit. As you can see, it's really starting to look like an underground waterfall cave area now. We've kind of built and sculpted the area in 3 directions, but why don't we turn the map this way and work on finishing this direction so we can kind of get an idea of what we want the shape of the room to be overall. Let's go back into geometry mode and sculpt out the last corner of the map. Remember, holding shift and right clicking allows you to actually move the camera off the map to give you a better view of where you need to be. Now, if you remember the area of the Lost Valley, there is this kind of inlet where Lara kind of travels into another section of caves before she gets to the infamous valley. So we kind of have to start thinking about where we want that to be, because we know it's kind of around this area here. So we have to remember that Lara needs to kind of be able to kind of climb in there and kind of traverse it. How about if we make the center there the entry point to go to the next part of the cave? So we'll kind of build our slopes around it just to give it a natural shape. I'm going to go back to face edit mode, or sometimes I call it paint mode, and paint in these mountains now. How about we finish painting the floor? And we want the room to kind of stop around here. So as you can see, we built out the first room, but as you can see, we have all this excess space around the area that we sculpted out. So what we want to do now is crop the area. And cropping is really simple. Go back to geometry mode. We're going to select all the tiles that we've sculpted. That is basically the area of the map that we want to keep. And we're going to press the crop button by pressing crop room. Make sure the area that we want sculpted to keep is selected in red. This will give us some measurements. It's going to tell us it's going to remove 1 tile from the left, 2 from the right, and 6 from the south. And we're going to press OK. And now the room has been cropped to only the part of the map that we want to keep. And as you can see, when we go back to face edit mode, it's going to really start to come to life like the infamous Lost Valley waterfall room. Let's go ahead and finish texturing it. Make sure they don't leave any parts of the map untextured. That'll still be green. So we've currently painted most of the waterfall cave. We haven't done the ceiling quite yet. If you find yourself unsatisfied with the texturing that you've done, because again, this is your first attempt, so it's not going to be perfect, you can erase the textures that you've placed on the faces. To do so, all you have to do is press the eraser and then select any texture that you want, and that will erase it. That allows you the opportunity to go back and try texturing again if you're not happy with how it turned out the first time. Again, holding shift will allow you to rotate the angle of a texture. That's looking a little bit better. So for the first room that we built in Tomb Editor, I'm quite happy with how it's looking. We'll make the texturing look better in another video when I explore advanced texturing techniques, but for our first room that we built in the engine, it's not looking too bad. All that's left to do is to paint the ceiling. I'm going to go ahead and use a simple texture to paint the ceiling to give the illusion that it's a closed-in cave. And actually, I want to paint the ceiling all in one go, so what I'm going to do is press the Textures button on the drop-down menu and press Texture Ceiling. So we've successfully textured the entire first room that we've ever built in Tomb Engine, and as you can see, it's looking quite good. Usually when you build a room, it's a great idea to look at it in the game to see what you've created. That sometimes can be energizing to keep you motivated to keep building, and also it gives you an opportunity to spot any problems in the level if you need to go back into the editor and fix them. To test your level, of course, we need to put Lara Croft back onto the map. So to do that, we're going to go back to 3D geometry mode. We're going to see that Lara's right here in the items panel, and we're going to press the plus button and place her anywhere on the map. I'm going to save the project, and actually I'm going to press build level and play. So once the game loads in, you can immediately see what you've built, and as you can see, it does quite look like the Waterfall Cave from the Tomb Raider Lost Valley level. You can fully interact with the level. As you can see, the water is not doing anything. We'll cover that in another tutorial, but you can still test your level and jump around and traverse the environment. Here you can kind of get a better idea of how clicks define how Lara is going to approach the geometry. So this is a 2-click tall surface, which means Lara is going to have to vault up like that. This is a 3-click tall surface, which if I remind you is the same height as Lara herself, which means she's going to vault up like that. And because that's only 1 tile wide, she can run up it like that. As you can see, this would be the area of the level where you do the infamous swan dive. However, we actually haven't built, the ceiling to be even taller in this video. We're going to cover that in another tutorial. And eventually you will, of course, be able to swan dive off of that into a swimming pool. But for your first attempt at the very first room you've ever built in Tomb Editor, it should look quite like this, which isn't bad for your first room. Even though this has been the first basic room that we've built together, you can already see that we worked on complex geometry that gives a natural looking environment if you're building caves, ruins, jungles, temples and dungeons, and also an introduction to building kind of the basic building block squares that Lara can actually climb up onto and traverse like this. Again, whenever you're finished playing, press P to go to the menu and then exit title, and then exit game to bring you back to the Tomb Editor. I think this is a fantastic place to end off our very first tutorial that we've done on Tomb Editor and Tomb Engine. We've built our first room on the map and I think it looks really good. We can go to face edit mode and see what it looks like. We've done great geometry, natural rocky environments. We have a waterfall here which we'll animate at a later tutorial. We've done some really good building blocks today, and in the next videos we'll go into more advanced techniques as we build the level of the Lost Valley out. If you enjoyed this tutorial and you want to keep watching for future ones, do subscribe to the channel. But other than that, I hope you guys are keeping safe and well, and I will see you all in a future video and tutorial. Thank you so much for watching. Bye.